We pick up on Vincent van Gogh's life during his most prolific period as an artist. It's the last 2 years of his life. This is one of his self-portraits from about this time. Vincent lives for a while with fellow Impressionist artist Paul Gauguin in Arles. And this is a self-portrait of Gauguin from the same year. The two of them have a violent falling out that results in Vincent cutting off part of his left ear. A few scholars have argued that perhaps it was Gauguin who wounded Vincent. However it happened, the violent incident left Vincent reeling. He eventually checks himself into a nearby mental health asylum where he stays for 12 months. During that one full year, of course, he continues to paint. This painting is titled Corridor in the Asylum. Last week, we talked about the influence of Japanese art in Vincent's painting. Vincent was also inspired by the painter Jean-Francois Millet's painting of a sower. In fact, Vincent completed no less than 30 paintings or drawings on this theme of the sower. He wrote to Theo, "I'm working on another sower, an immense citron yellow disc for the sun, a green-yellow sky with pink clouds, the field violet, the sower and the tree Prussian blue." And here's the painting he described. Many have pointed out how the central tree in this painting echoes the Japanese prints that Vincent loved. We see the sun serve as a sort of halo, suggesting that the sower is close to the land, is holy, the sower is sacred. The painting also calls to mind Jesus' parable of the sower, casting seed on fertile soil, though some falls on rock and clay. You're thinking that's our biblical text for today. It's not. But it might have been on Vincent's mind as he painted and drew so many images of the sower. Vincent wrote to a friend that Jesus, quote, lived serenely as a greater artist than all other artists, despising marble and clay and working in living flesh. So let's just pause a moment to take in this beautiful painting to see what it evokes in us. Have you ever had the experience of learning something new that you can't believe you didn't know? And you think, does everybody else know this and I'm the only one who doesn't? I had one of those aha moments doing my sermon research this week. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. And that is what you call a teaser to start the sermon. Our scripture reading for today is a parable, a very familiar parable. It's commonly referred to as the parable of the prodigal son. Of course, in the Bible, there are no titles given to parables in the original text. Over time, the titles arise from the content. The prodigal son parable is probably among the most tender and well-developed of all the parables. Interestingly, it is found only in Luke. The passage begins with this verse, Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 2. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." These verses set the context for the rest of the chapter. Jesus responds to this criticism by telling 3 parables. I'm not going to read them all, but the 3 parables are all about things that are lost: a sheep, a coin, and a son. The shepherd leaves his 99 sheep so that he can look for the one that's missing. A woman loses one of her 10 coins, and she scours her house until she finds it. And then in our passage today, a father loses his son, whom he deeply loves. I've heard the story of the prodigal son all my life. Chances are you have too. And here's the thing that I learned this week. I always thought that the definition of the word prodigal had to do with something or someone, perhaps a highly favored someone, who goes away and then comes back. That's what the prodigal son did. The word prodigal, however, has nothing to do with that. Prodigal is defined as spending money or resources freely or recklessly, wastefully extravagant. Now, probably you already know that. There are so many things I do not know, but now I know what prodigal means. And since the story is in all likelihood familiar, I'm not going to read it to you. I'm just going to tell it to you in my own words. As I tell you the story, I invite you to think about 2 things. Who is the prodigal? Who is wastefully extravagant? And second, what feeling does this story evoke in you? Since I'm the one telling the story, and since I'm paying attention to what the story evokes in me, I start with these images. Meet my brothers, everyone. Since our dad was a photographer, I could show you so many pictures of me and my brothers. Believe me, this is the tip of the iceberg. Here is our Christmas card from 1968 or so. My oldest brother, Mickey, on the left. Then my younger brother, Colin, me, who is obviously the cutest one, the one who looks like an angel, and my brother, Wally, the second born. I start here because this story tends to evoke strong feelings about siblings, for those of us who have them. Chances are good that the longest relationships of our lives are with our siblings. Sometimes that is a wonderful gift, and sometimes it's challenging. I start by introducing you to my siblings as an invitation for you then to think of yours if you have them. So, our story, rather Jesus' story. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 2 sons. By the way, I thought about telling the story in a more gender-inclusive way. But for a variety of contextual reasons, I'm not going to do that. I'll just use the gender roles that Luke uses. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said, "Dad, give me my share of the money that I'll someday inherit from you. I don't want to wait until you die." Dad says, "Okay," and he divides the inheritance between the 2 sons. The younger son takes off. He's got living to do. He goes far away, and he spends all of his money in dissolute living. I was a bit foggy on the definition of dissolute, so I looked it up. You're welcome. Dissolute means lax in morals, licentious, if you will. The younger son then goes off to spend all of his money doing things that most parents don't want their children to do. I will let you fill in the blanks on that. He runs out of money about the time that a famine hits. Everybody's hungry. He gets a job slopping the hogs, which, as jobs go, is not the best one. Pretty soon, he starts envying the hogs. He's jealous that the pigs get to eat that disgusting slop. You have to be pretty hungry when pig slop looks good. He starts thinking about home, about all the delicious meals he used to eat sitting around the table with his bro and his dad. He thinks, I'm just going to go back home and apologize. Maybe Dad will let me work for him. Off he goes. By the way, have you ever seen the movie Gone with the Wind? Yes, okay. There's that scene in Gone with the Wind where Ashley Wilkes comes home from war and his wife Melanie sees him coming a long way off. She's out on the front porch and she just drops what she's doing and she runs to meet him and then he runs to meet her. And the camera shots are just back and forth between the two of them, running for what seems like forever. That's what I picture in this parable when the son returns home. His dad sees him and starts running. The son apologizes. The dad says, forget about it, you're home. That's all I care about. Let's eat. And here, wear this beautiful robe and this ring. I even got you matching sandals, which is pretty sweet. They strike up the band and pop their first bottle of champagne. The older brother misses the toast. Why? Because he's working his tail off in the fields, y'all. Hello, somebody's got to do it. He's like, what is happening? They say, your brother's home, party time. And he says, not so fast. I've done everything you ever asked me to, Dad, and for all this time, and I never get jack squat for it. Dad kind of pulls him aside, and he says, you know I love you, son. You are in my heart, and I would do anything for you. It's just that your brother was dead. He was lost, and now he's found. Just like last week's parable of the fig tree, this parable is missing the final act. We don't know how the story ends or how the next chapter begins. We don't know how the brothers respond. Does the older sibling shift his perspective and welcome his lost sibling home? Does the younger sibling wind up sticking around, wearing his robe and matching sandals around the house, fully restored in the family? We do know that at the end of this story, as Jesus tells it, well, as Luke imagines Jesus telling it, the younger brother is in the party. The older brother has to decide if that's where he will be. I asked you to listen to the story and to pay attention to your own feelings. How the story hits us depends on who we are and is impacted by our experience of family. The story itself seems to tempt us to decide which brother is more beloved, which brother is more distasteful. Is the younger brother careless and irresponsible, taking advantage of the dad? Or we might be tempted to judge the older brother, the responsible one, the one who's not up for the party. Are we concerned that responsible, faithful people don't get extra credit that they deserve? Both of the brothers, in a way, are looking out for themselves more than for the family or the community. Both of the brothers have learned from the father, but they've learned different things. One of them knows the joy of extravagant celebration. The other knows the satisfaction of faithfulness. Maybe both of the brothers need to learn each other's lessons. We could give this parable another title. How about the parable of the self-serving brothers? Or even better, if prodigal means one who spends excessively, wastefully, who does that better than the father? He freely shares the inheritance when he's asked to do so, and then he freely, lavishly, without judgment or condemnation, welcomes his child home with open arms. The Father is excessively generous with his love, just as God is excessively generous with her love. So maybe we could call this parable the parable of the prodigal parent. In this chapter of Luke, we see Jesus criticized for his inclusivity. And in response, he tells these three stories of searching for lost things: a sheep, a coin, a child. God is then envisioned as a prodigal shepherd who wastes his time to go looking for that one sheep that is missing. God is the woman who will not rest until all of her coins are found. God is the parent who waits with unrelenting, non-conditional love. Those three images of God, shepherd, woman, father, show us a God who has no interest in punitive judgment, no interest in condemnation. God's not mad. God's not punishing. The parable invites us to sit with the younger son in the messes of his own making, with the elder son in the bitterness and fear of being overlooked, and with the parent as he leaves the comfort of his home to bring in all that is lost and all that feels forsaken. Perhaps Vincent's sower can help us envision this kind of prodigal God. A God who sows seeds of love recklessly and with great abandon. A God who's not concerned with wasting seed. A God who calls us to do the same. This image is an invitation to consider how our actions are like scattering seed. The seeds we sow with our words and our actions bear fruit. When we sow seeds, the outcomes are out of our control, sometimes out of our sight entirely. We can sow positive, loving seeds, or we can sow seeds of destruction and bitterness. May we all be prodigal sowers, lavishly, open-heartedly sowing seeds of love. Amen.